Before thought settles into concept, before language names what is present, a distinction is already at work. Something is here, something is there, self and world, figure and ground, contact and resistance. Experience begins at that seam, though the seam is easy to miss precisely because it is so constant. The first division. The opening lines of the Tao Te Ching speak of a movement from unity into differentiation. One becomes two becomes three, and the 10,000 things arise. This can be read cosmologically, but it can also be read phenomenologically. In lived experience, awareness appears through distinction. You cannot perceive without contrast. Vision requires edge. Hearing requires variation. Thought requires difference. Even silence is known only against the possibility of sound. Experience does not happen in undifferentiated unity. It happens at a boundary, where difference becomes knowable and relation becomes possible. The contact point. In contemplative traditions, attention is often directed toward precisely this point of contact, the place where sensation becomes experience, where impulse meets naming, where awareness encounters what it is aware of. In Vipassana, for example, impermanence is not first a doctrine. It is observed as instability at the surface of experience itself. There is always a meeting, sensation and observer, feeling and naming, impulse and restraint. This meeting is not necessarily violent. More often, it is creative. The boundary is not a crack in reality. It is a generative interface through which experience keeps renewing itself. The practical implication matters. In difficult conversations, for example, the goal is often imagined as either defending one's position or dissolving disagreement. In practice, a more fruitful possibility appears when one can remain at the boundary long enough for a third thing to emerge: clearer distinction, better contact, and less collapse into reaction. Love lives there too. We often think of love as a feeling one person has toward another, but looked at more carefully, love is inseparable from relation itself. It is felt where self and other meet. It cannot exist without distinction, yet it also softens the hardness of distinction. It lives at the edge. This is why love feels both intimate and vast. It is structured by separation, but animated by unity. The boundary is not fragile. It is inexhaustibly generative. Stability is not the absence of tension. In engineering, stability rarely means rigidity. A stable system is one that can tolerate feedback, delay, and disturbance without losing all coherence. Remove the boundary, and one also removes the site at which feedback becomes possible. What remains either freezes or breaks apart. Something similar happens in human experience. Too much collapse into unity, and nothing can be articulated. Too much division, and fragmentation takes over. Health lives in the dynamic interface. Many distortions can be understood as overextension along one axis. Fusion without differentiation may feel profound for a moment, but it becomes inarticulate. Differentiation without contact may feel precise, but it becomes sterile. The issue is not choosing one pole. It is learning how to move between them without losing coherence. The heart of the paradox. The Heart Sutra says, "Form is emptiness, emptiness is form." Read carelessly, that can sound like mystical ornament. Read more closely, it names something structural. Form cannot appear without openness. Openness cannot be known apart from form. The two are not separate, but neither do they collapse into indifference. Experience unfolds in that paradox, and much of contemplative maturity consists in learning not to collapse one side into the other too quickly. Effortless and effortful. There's something strangely natural about this boundary. It does not have to be manufactured. It is simply how consciousness operates. And yet, to remain present at this edge can require enormous discipline. To stay with uncertainty, to remain open in contact, and to allow differentiation without losing coherence. Often the effort is subtle rather than dramatic. It may mean returning to the breath in the middle of irritation, withholding a quick conclusion, or staying in contact with someone one would rather avoid. In that sense, the boundary is effortless and demanding at once. When words dissolve. At times, language itself falls away. The seam remains, but description fails. Expression may shift into gesture, music, or silence. The boundary is still there. If anything, those moments can make it feel more immediate because conceptual control loosens. The deeper suggestion. What if intelligence itself is not the possession of a self, but the dynamic sensitivity to this boundary? What if clarity is not certainty, but the capacity to remain at the seam without collapsing it prematurely? Perhaps reality is not made of things. Perhaps it is made of meetings. And every moment, every perception, every act of love, every insight, is a recreation of that first division. Not a fracture so much as a beginning.